Welcome to Photoshop Creative Cloud 2020 Part 2 Introduction. Okay, we dealt with a lot of the toolbar last video, and this time I want to cover some of the pull downs that you'll be using. The other part of the interface that you might want to know about is a couple of tools right in the center. This one is the history. If you wanted to go back in time on any portions of your project, you can, and you can get rid of certain things, or kind of go back to a part where you maybe didn't make a mistake. That's your history area. And then this other middle button is your properties. If you want rulers or a grid or some transparency settings, those are going to be there in the center on those two buttons. They're in the center of the program or the interface. So now we're going to kind of cover the rest of the pull-down menus. What I want to kind of talk a little bit about is the basic stuff that's in here. So inside of the file menu, we basically really use save, save as, revert. Sometimes we use export and import. Import means importing maybe video stills for an animated GIF, those kinds of things. Under the edit menu, we have some things in here that aren't really, they're ghosted out right now. But undo is Command Z. So that's undo state change or basically undo. Cut, copy, and paste is in there as well. Underneath the image menu, we have some changes that we can start to make to our project. So if you want to change the mode to grayscale, this is where you would do that. So also underneath mode are some other modes that you might want to know about. Also underneath adjustments, we can change brightness and contrast. So we can make our project either brighter or darker. We can change the contrast on your picture to change the blacks and the shadows. A lot of the top of the image window is going to be in the adjustments, brightness, levels, curves, exposure. They're going to do basically the same thing. Hue saturation is an interesting one. We're going to use actually the color yellow because it's easy to use in here. If I just isolate the yellows in here, I can start to just change the yellow colors. So notice it's not affecting the sky at all. Unfortunately, because green has yellow in it, it will affect the green in some way. You can change the lightness or the darkness, and then also the saturation of the color by just clicking on the slider. Basically, there's a lot of things inside of the image menu underneath adjustments that will change your project quite a lot. So color is pretty much in the center. I'm not going to do the rest of them. Invert means that it's going to, invert all the colors to the opposite. We're going to undo that and go back to image. And then if we go to posterize, this is going to put kind of a unreal filter on. Makes it look very contrasted. It has several layers. Also underneath image adjustments is the threshold, which will just be black and white, no grayscale, and you can change that as light or as dark as you want. Make a graphic image. Then also underneath adjustments is gradient map. Gradient map is actually going to put a preset of colors over the top. It just so happened that I had black and white in my color palette. It's going to be whatever the color palette is, so you can change all of these gradient maps. Basically takes that gradient map and it sort of maps it over the tones in your image. Finally, selective color and some of these others, shadows, highlights, HDR, desaturate, all those are going to change your photo in some way. You can also have the computer do it underneath auto tone, contrast, and color, and then we get to image size. Image size is super important because it really means what size the image really is. Right now, this image is 42 by 50 something in inches, and it's 72 dpi. If I uncheck the resample image checkbox, it keeps all of the resolution and the height and width stuck together. And so what happens is I can change this back to 300, and then it changes into a 10 by 13 image. That's pretty big for a photo on Photoshop. That's kind of where you're gonna know where or how big something is. Image rotation, you can rotate your project here. It's gonna rotate the whole thing. It's not just gonna rotate a section of it. When we get to the compositing video, I'll kind of show you how to use layers and how to composite things together and how you can change and, kind of free transform items so that those are kind of set up the way that you want them for compositing. So we'll rotate this photo back by going 90 counterclockwise, and we'll get it back so it's rotated back. The layers palette we'll cover in depth after that. A couple of other things that you need to do. There is a type pull down menu. We'll cover that in another time as well. And then really underneath select, the only thing you really need to know is select all. The keyboard shortcut is Command A for that. Underneath filters, this is kind of where all the artistic magic happens. I usually like to go to the filter gallery and I'll kind of zoom out to look at my image. And then I will start to put, pre-made filters on the top of my photos. And this might take a few minutes for them to actually load. Filters are really, some of these can be quite difficult to get on large photos. And since this is 10 by 13 at 300 dpi, it might take a little bit of time to actually see what's going on in these. But it's a preset of artistic filters. One of the things that can get really can make your image kind of muddy is if you put more than a couple of filters on something. It's really going to start to make things look not so much like a photograph anymore and more like a texture. So sometimes people actually put extra filters on just to show the texture. A couple of my faves. This one's one of my favorites. The other thing about these is that they can be customized. So people always ask me, how did you get that filter? And I always say, well, it was customized. So I'm just turning some stuff up over here. And on every photo, some of these are going to look different. So it just depends on your original photo as well. Here's some texture. So you get the idea. These can be layered to infinity, but once you hit like 5, you're not going to recognize your picture anymore. There's some other ones in here, blurring, distorting, noise, that kind of thing. We're going to skip the 3D menu and we're going to go to, kind of view, and then the Windows window. That is all of your working palettes. And then we come to the help. The help window is really not helpful unless you're super specific in this box. So you have to be super specific. If I'm not there, can't answer your question, I would then go to the help window.